What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you guys seen our last video, we were working on the $500 Civic and we got the manual swap done. We got the new clutch and transmission in this thing and we're able to go take it for a ride and it drove great. This thing's gonna be a little ripper once we get the turbo on it. But in that video, there were a few little things that we had left to button up. One of them being the transmission mount. If we head over to the car here and take a look, I can show you that the automatic mount is different than the one you need for the manual. This is the one that came off the automatic. It's got 2 bolts and they are in the wrong location for it to bolt up to this manual transmission, which has 3 bolt holes and it sits back a little bit further. So instead of trying to track one of those down, the rest of these motor mounts are pretty soft as well. So we're gonna go ahead and start building our own solid mount. We're gonna make that transmission mount solid. I don't really care about noise, vibration, or harshness. Its main purpose is just to have fun and rip around, especially once that turbo gets on it. So let's get through the intro and jump right into today's video. So now that we've gone through the intro, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're working with. So as you can see, I've got a few things laid out in front of us here. First one being this solid aluminum mount. This is like an eBay, Amazon style solid mount. One of my buddies gave it to me for free, so we're gonna try to use it. Then we've got the factory automatic mount, some rectangle tubing, and we're gonna try to put these together to make our own solid mount. Now, it's not gonna be a showpiece by any means, but it's gonna get the job done. So the plan is we're gonna bolt this up to the frame, probably backwards actually, bolt it up to the frame, have the factory transmission mount coming off of it, which will then bolt to this rectangle tubing. And then from there, we will bolt this rectangle tubing into the transmission via a plate. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make a solid plate that's gonna go to all 3 of these transmission bolt holes so that we can tie that into the square tubing and work out from there. So let's go ahead, head over to the bench. We'll get a piece of 1/4" steel cut so that we can start making into a plate to bolt right to the transmission. So as you guys seen, we cut out a 4.5 by 4.5 inch square of steel. We had some 1/4" inch scrap plate laying around, so we used that. And then I went ahead and made a template out of cardboard and popped out our bolt holes so that we now have our bolt pattern from the transmission. So I went ahead and marked them with a transfer punch. I put some yellow paint on there so you guys could see. And now we can take this over to the drill press and start popping these holes in it so that hopefully we can bolt this right up to the transmission case. So now that we've got the plate for the transmission made, I went ahead and bolted up the solid aluminum mount with the automatic bracket. And now we need to adapt from that bracket over to the plate we just made. So I've got some square tubing up in here that I think is gonna work out perfectly for this adapter. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna head over to the bandsaw, cut ourselves a 6-inch piece of this, and use it as a spacer and adapter to join the automatic bracket with the plate we just made. Now we can take our brackets out of our way for a minute so we can get our plate off and go mark some bolt holes. As you guys seen, we went ahead and drilled the 2 holes into our adapter plate that we're making. So we've got the plate for the transmission with the 3 holes right here. Then we've got our adapter plate and spacer that we're making. And then we've got the automatic bracket. Now everything is lining up pretty good. We've got it loosely bolted up. We do need to drill 2 more holes in the spacer adapter here so that the automatic bracket can bolt into it. So I'm gonna have to go get a couple bolts for that. You might hear my truck in the background warming up. It's actually snowing out there pretty decent. So we're gonna let that warm up a second and we will go get some more bolts. And then we might have to grind down on this bracket a little bit, or the head of this bolt, so that it fits nice and flat. But things coming out pretty decent, especially once it's painted black. I think it'll look just fine. So let's go get some nuts and bolts and washers and come back and put this thing together. So I just got back from the hardware store, and when I got back, I ground down the head of the bolt that goes behind our transmission bracket, and we took it down quite a bit. I think it's gonna fit a lot better this way. It'll give us room against the bracket so we don't have to grind on the bracket. A wrench or socket's still gonna grab it fine. So let's head over to the car, test fit everything, and mark our last 2 holes. So as you guys can see, we've got this thing mocked up. We've got our automatic bracket coming across here, and then our plate that we made that bolts to the transmission, and the square tubing adapter. So we're gonna use our transfer punch here and just pop these last 2 marks in it so that we can transfer those holes over to our adapter. And then I'm gonna decide if I'm gonna put a nut on the inside of the square tube here and tack it in place so you don't need a wrench, or if we're just gonna use a wrench and a ratchet when you gotta tighten them. But let's go ahead and get those marks popped, bring it over to the drill press, and then we can final fit this thing. So there's one more thing that I want to do for ease of installation here, and I'm going to tell you guys I don't recommend doing it because we are working with galvanized steel. So as you can see, I've got our piece rigged up here, and it is galvanized. I was just using it because it's what we had laying around, so I do not recommend you guys welding to galvanized. I'm going to have the exhaust fan going, and I'm going to hold my breath when I tack it. So like I said, do not weld on galvanized. If you clean it off really good, you can weld to it, but it's just not recommended. The fumes are really bad for you. But we're just going to be tacking the nuts for those 2 last holes that we drilled. We're going to tack the nuts on the inside so that you don't have to worry about getting a wrench on them. So that's what we're going to do now. Tack this one, and then I'll tack the one that's down in there, and then we're ready to start putting this thing together. So we got the nuts welded on the inside of the square tubing, as you can see. So now when we put this up there, we'll be able to just thread the bolts right into them. We don't have to mess around trying to get a wrench on the backside. So that's going to be super handy. So let's go ahead and put this thing together. Alright, we've got that all tightened up, everything pulled together nice and flush. Pretty happy with how it came out. Not the most beautiful thing in the world or any showpiece by any means, but once we spray everything gloss black, you'll never notice it. I think it'll look just fine. And we might do a little angle cut on this plate where there's no bolt hole over here. Might cut that off, or I might leave it. Haven't decided yet. But paint it all gloss black and I think it'll look fine. We did get a lock nut for the outer side of this automatic transmission bracket that we used. We've got a lock nut that goes behind the solid aluminum bushing here so that that shouldn't back out on us. But other than that, I'm super happy with how it came out. So let's move on to the next thing we want to finish up. Alright guys, so now that we've gotten that mount finished up, I want to move on to mounting the catch can and running the lines for it. This thing's definitely going to need one once we get the turbo on it. So I went ahead and picked up a cheap one from Amazon, and I've been running one very similar to this on the GTO for quite a while now, and it's worked out perfectly fine. This is a new one that I found on there, and I actually like this one a little bit better, so I'm going to put this one on the GTO and move the GTO one to this, but for now we're gonna use this because it mounts up the same. And I like this one because it comes with 2 baffles. It's got a cheap little baffle in there, and then it comes with another one just like it. And it's got a little space in here where we could put some like steel wool or something like that to catch the oil out of the air and then let it drain back into the can. So I do like that, especially for a cheap can. I think this whole kit was about $72, and it comes with some line, the filter, and a bunch of fittings. I'll link this in the description below. So let's head over to the car, figure out where we want to mount it. That's where we're going to start so that we know where we need to run our lines to, and then we will work from there. So I think we're going to end up setting ours up right over here behind the coolant bucket on the passenger side. I like that placement. When you guys go to find placement for your catch can, always make sure you have the bottom drain fitting on there and also the filter, so that you don't mount it and then find out you don't have room to add those things. So this is where we're gonna go. Let's go ahead and drill a couple holes. We're gonna use the nutserts. So we'll drill a hole the size of the nutsert, rivet it in, and then we will have a nice solid spot for mounting our catch can. So now that we've got that hole drilled, we can go ahead and grab one of our nutserts and slide it right in the frame here. And we're going to use our tool, crimp that down, and we'll be good to mount the catch can. If you guys haven't used a nutsert tool before, I definitely recommend picking one up. They have them in all different sizes, and they have been super handy. I used them a lot on the GTO build, and ever since then I've been using them wherever I can. So let's go ahead and get this thing in so we can get the can mounted. And now just like that, we've got a nice little spot that we can bolt something up. I always check to make sure they bit good. That one seems like it did. So we're good to go. Let's go ahead and grab the can, and we can start getting that thing bolted up in here. And now just like that, we've got our catch can mounted. So let's go ahead and decide where we're gonna start running lines from and see how we wanna route them. So now that we've got our catch can mounted, we can start running our lines. So on the back of these D-series blocks, you've got a little black box like this, and this is your PCV system. It's just a little black oil canister that can catch oil and vapors, and then it goes through your one-way check valve here, your PCV valve, and we have gotten rid of that, and we are now running a AN line in that location. It's just a little bolt-in deal that adapts over to a -10 AN. I'll show you guys when we get under the car to run these lines, and it'll be linked in the description below this video. But we're gonna be running our lines from that over to our catch can. I'm not gonna go crazy in depth on how to make the lines. If you guys wanna see a video on how to do AN or PTFE lines, we have a couple of them back on the channel, so go check those out. But today we're just gonna focus on getting these lines made and ran. So let's start making some lines. Alright guys, so we got the catch can mounted and lines ran. We ended up going out right at this top fitting along the hard line that I made for the clutch the other day, all the way to the back to the firewall across to the fitting on our block. It came out pretty good. I think it looks nice and neat and out of the way. We were gonna tuck one up in here. I have a bigger can we were gonna use, but if we blow this little guy up with the turbo, I don't want it to spit oil out right over a hot header, and I also want to leave as much room up there for the turbo just in case. The only thing I'm worried about with it being over here is maybe the charge piping, but we can worry about that when we get there. So it looks pretty decent, not a showpiece, but I'm happy with how it came out. So that leads us to the next thing on today's list, which is fixing the gauge cluster. We put one in this the other day, and one of the bulbs in it is out, so like part of the gauges are super dim, and it's also a automatic, so it's got like the park reverse neutral drive logo on it, and it flashes a transmission code, so we're gonna try to cover that up. When I switched it out, ours originally did not have a tack at all, and I wanted to put a tack in it, but I couldn't find a manual one local for sale, so I found an automatic that had a tack, because that's really all we needed anyways. So I've got a couple spare ones I actually kicking around here, so I wanted to show you guys. It comes out super easy. You get the trim piece around it popped out with the clips, and then it's just got 4 screws holding it in, one here, and then one in each bottom corner. So we're gonna go ahead, pop that out. We'll take this thing apart and then cover up the logos right there, and also switch out the bulbs. I went ahead and bought a little kit on eBay. Of course, we had to go with a color. Wasn't just gonna go with the regular white. So we went with some blue LEDs. So we're gonna get those in. Like I said, I will link that in the description below as always. So let's go ahead, hop in the car. We'll get this one out and we'll start working on it. Got a screw there and a screw over here. Then this just unclips and pops right out of the way. Now we've got 4 screws in here. Once you get all the screws out, you can just lean it forward a little bit and it'll slide out. And then you've got some plugs on the back here. Depending on the options your car has will dictate how many plugs you have. So we're gonna go ahead and start unplugging these. Then once you get all the plugs done, it'll come right out just like so. So let's head over to the bench and take this thing apart. First thing we're gonna do now that we've got it out is I'm gonna pop this clear lens off the front of it so that we can get in there and put something over the park reverse neutral drive stuff. So you just need a small screwdriver or a pick, or you can just use your fingers. These come apart pretty easy compared to some other ones I've done. So I'm just gonna use my fingers, get these all started, and then just work your way right around. And then just be careful because you have to come straight out for the mileage or odometer reset button. So you can take that out, set that aside. Now you can use, if you have any lint in here, you can use a piece of tape, like a clear piece of tape, like so. And you just kind of fold it over like that. And you can come in here and pick out any little pieces of lint or dust. Alright, now I'm going to use some electrical tape just because I think it's going to be the closest thing we have to a match. You could use like Gorilla Tape or whatever you want to use, but this is what we're going to try. So I've got some nice new electrical tape here. And we're going to want to cut ourselves a piece big enough to cover everything. Try to cut it nice and straight again. And just lay it in there the best you can, nice flat and straight. Wasn't as perfectly straight as I'd like, but it's covered. Doesn't blend perfectly, but like I said, it'll do the job. So now we can go ahead and put our cover back on. So as you don't see any pieces of dust in here that you want to try to get out. I learned this trick when I was doing the gauges in the Hellcat, when I did the yellow backdrop to the gauges. It works good to get all the any lint or anything like that out of it. Alright, now let's clip this back together. Just make sure all your clips are lined up, your mileage reset, and then the service reminder is in place. And then we can just go right around it slowly. And clip it right in, just like that. Now we can flip it over and start doing the LEDs. So we're going to start with the bigger of the bulbs that we need to change here. This is a 194 style bulb, and as you can see, mine's got a regular LED in it right this second. So we're going to take our new one out. And just swap this out. I'm going to put that one in like so. Making sure it seats all the way. Lock that one in. Now that we've gotten the 194 bulb in, we're going to go ahead and pop off this plastic cover so that we can do the rest of the bulbs back here that we need to. This is a housing for your temperature and your fuel gauge, as well as your park reverse neutral drive lights. So we're going to have to go ahead and pry this guy up. Just got to go in here like so. Working your way right around. Carefully. This will come out like so. And we're going to be replacing this one right in here. So now that we've gotten that off, we're going to be replacing this one, this one, this one, and this one. So we'll start over here. Just simply pop that out like so. Now sadly the polarity on these do matter, but there's really no good way to know if we're correct. So we're kind of just going to have to go with it, put it back together, try it. So let's go ahead and put that guy back in. Now we can grab the cover for our temp and fuel gauge, line the bulbs back up. We could probably pull those bulbs out, but I'm just going to leave them. Line those back up, and then carefully clip this in. Just like so. Now we can flip the gauge cluster back over. And we've got two more that we've got to do. We'll do this one first. These two front ones are the ones that come separately in a bag as a pair together. Alright, now we can take this back over to the car and test it. Like I said, polarity does matter, so I'm hoping that we just get lucky. But we'll have to wait and see. So let's go ahead and try this thing. Alright, so I plugged the gauge cluster back in. Let's go ahead, hit the key, and turn the lights on and see what we've got. They dim still. Looks pretty sweet. I like it. Alright. Seems like everything's working. I did have to switch one bulb, but it's a good idea to try to put them all in the same direction so it's either all wrong or all right. It worked for the most part for me. Everything but one was correct. So let's go ahead, throw the bezel back on, and then take this thing for a ride. All right, guys, so we got this thing warmed up and rolled outside. We're going to go take it for a quick little ride. It is snowing a little bit, and it got dark on us, but the blue lights came out pretty sweet. Everything seems to be good so far. So let's go take it for a quick little ride and see what we think. Alright guys, so as you can tell, it is the next day. We decided to call it quits last night because it was snowing pretty good and I didn't feel like taking this thing out. But we're gonna go ahead and take this thing for a ride today, see how our solid mount feels, make sure our catch can lines don't rub on anything, and that we are good to go. Our gauges are definitely working. They definitely looked pretty cool last night when it was dark out. So far, the mount is definitely noticeably better. You can feel a difference in the shifter. The shifter doesn't move every time you push in the clutch or anything anymore, where before it would. You could feel the whole motor rocking quite a bit. So that's definitely a plus. It does sound like there's a little bit of noise to it though. You can definitely hear the transmission noises a little bit more now than you would before, but not a big deal. This thing's not a luxury cruiser. Once it gets the turbo on it, it'll be perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and hop on the highway with it. This is the first time I've had it on the highway since we did the manual swap, so this will be pretty interesting. Sorry if that sun's blinding you guys. See how fifth feels. Well, so far so good. It went through all the gears, so that's a huge plus. And the motor is definitely noticeably stiffer now. The motor and transmission are way stiffer. Like I said, you can feel a huge difference in the way the shifter feels. Before, every time I touched the clutch, the shifter would bounce around on us. All right, guys, we had to get off the highway. It was an accident or something going on, so I'm gonna go back the other way. It was a great way to break in a new clutch though, all that standstill traffic. Thing shifts so much better with the solid mount, and we made a few modifications to the shifter. It's just old and clapped out, so we used some washers and had to drill out the little bushings in it and whatnot. I think I touched on that in the last video, but that seemed to really help, as well as our solid mount. That thing makes the world of difference, because before you'd be trying to shift through the gears and you could feel the motor moving on you, and the motor and transmission moving on you as you're trying to find the next gear, so it just made it really challenging. But now that it's nice and solid, it's easy to find the gears, even with this old beat up stock shifter. Trying to still be easy on this new clutch. Like I said, that traffic was pretty much its break-in period, but it seems really good. And like I said, you can find the next gear much easier now because the engine and transmission aren't moving on you. Falls right into gear. No guessing anymore. So that solid mount helped tremendously, because all of our other engine mounts are pretty much smoked. So having that one solid, we're gonna stiffen up some of the other ones later on, but just putting that one in for now has made a massive difference. So I'm super happy with it. Let's head back to the house and take a look and make sure everything's still good. So we just got back from taking this thing for a ride, and that transmission mount has been working out phenomenal. Super happy with that, and the catch can location. Everything seems to be working out there as well, and it is nice to have the gauge cluster working again. We have no more dim spots, so that's cool, and I like the blue lighting. So super happy with how the transmission mount came out. This thing is way stiffer now. You can literally feel it in the shifter. Before we made this mount, whenever you'd go to shift, so let off the gas or get on the gas, you could feel the engine and transmission moving away from you or towards you, and it made it really iffy if you were going to get it into gear correctly or not. So by doing this solid mount, it made it so much better. It falls right into gear now, and with the modifications we made to the shifter in the last video, everything is just way tighter and feels like it should. So now when you're going through the gears, it just clicks right in, no problem. You don't have to second guess it or anything. It does transfer a little bit more noise and vibration into the body of the car, as it will because it's a solid mount. But we do have some sheets of rubber that we might cut down and try to fit in there between where we have it bolted up to try to eat up some of that vibration, but also keeping everything stiff. But I'm not really worried about it, so we might visit that later, we might not. But once the turbo's on this thing, that's gonna be the last thing we're worried about. All you're gonna hear is the cool turbo noises. So super happy with how that turned out. As always, I appreciate you guys for checking out today's video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell, and we will catch you on the next one.